The lights dimmed in the massive exhibition hall of Nexus Prime Station. Hundreds of alien beings from across the galaxy sat in perfect rows, their various eyes, sensors, and optical organs focused on the center stage. The air buzzed with excitement and nervous energy as creatures with scales, fur, metallic skin, and stranger coverings whispered among themselves. Ambassador Vexthal stepped onto the platform. His tall, blue-skinned form moved with practiced grace as he raised his forearms to quiet the crowd. The Zelkari diplomat's red eyes gleamed under the bright stage lights as he began to speak in the common galactic tongue. "Friends and allies of the great galactic community," Vexthal announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's sound system. "Today you will witness something never before achieved in our long history of space travel and exploration." The crowd leaned forward. Representatives from the Alterian Council, their crystal bodies reflecting the stage lights like living prisms, sat next to the mechanical forms of the synthetic collective. Behind them, dozens of other species filled the seats, some breathing oxygen, others requiring special atmosphere suits, all united in their curiosity. "For 3,000 years, we have explored the dark corners of our galaxy," Vexthal continued. "We have found worlds of beauty and wonder. We have also found worlds of terror and death. But none have challenged us like the planet we call Kalos 7. A holographic display flickered to life above the stage, showing a dark, storm-covered world. Lightning flashed constantly across its surface, and massive shapes moved through the perpetual twilight of its atmosphere. "Kalos 7, the ambassador said, is what we classify as a death world. Its gravity is 3 times that of most inhabited planets. Its atmosphere burns the lungs of most species. Its storms can tear apart our strongest ships. And its creatures." He paused for effect. "Its creatures are the stuff of nightmares." The hologram changed to show various monstrous forms. Massive, tentacled beasts that could crush starships. Flying predators with wingspans wider than city blocks. But none compared to the final image that appeared, a sleek, powerful form covered in midnight black scales, with claws like curved swords and eyes that seemed to burn with intelligence. "The Ravenclaw," Vexthal announced. "The apex predator of Kalos 7. 12 feet of pure killing machine. No creature on its world dares to challenge it. No trap has ever held one. No weapon has ever stopped one from hunting." He smiled, showing sharp teeth. "Until now." The lights on stage shifted, and a section of the floor began to rise. What emerged made several members of the audience gasp and move back in their seats. The Ravenclaw stood in the center of a glowing energy cage, its massive form perfectly still. The creature's black scales seemed to absorb light, making it appear like a living shadow. Its claws, each longer than most beings' arms, gleamed under the stage lights. But the most striking thing about the beast was its eyes. They stared straight ahead, unfocused and empty. The fierce intelligence that the hologram had shown was gone, replaced by a vacant stare that spoke of a broken spirit. "Behold," Vexthal said proudly, "the first Ravenclaw ever captured alive. The first to be successfully tamed and controlled by any galactic species." A smaller Zelkari stepped onto the stage. Quindar was the Empire's most skilled beastmaster, famous throughout the galaxy for his ability to train and control dangerous creatures. He carried a small device in his hand that glowed with the same energy as the creature's cage. "Watch," Quindar commanded, pressing a button on his device. The energy cage dissolved. For a moment, the audience held its breath, waiting for the creature to attack. Instead, the Ravenclaw simply stood there, motionless. "Bow," Quindar ordered. The massive predator lowered its head and front legs in a perfect bow. The audience erupted in amazed chatter. "Roll over." The creature obeyed instantly, its 12-foot frame moving with surprising grace as it rolled completely over and returned to a standing position. "Show your claws." The Ravenclaw extended all of its razor-sharp claws, holding the pose until Quindar nodded his approval. For the next several minutes, the Beastmaster put the creature through an increasingly complex series of commands. The The Ravenclaw obeyed every single one without hesitation, moving like a perfectly programmed machine rather than a living being. "How is this possible?" called out one of the Altarian representatives, her crystal voice ringing with disbelief. Vexthul smiled wider. "Through the advanced mental conditioning techniques developed by our finest scientists, we have learned to break down the psychological barriers that make these creatures so dangerous. We can now reshape their minds, remake their instincts, and transform even the most violent predator into an obedient servant." The demonstration continued for another 20 minutes. The Ravenclaw performed tricks that would have been impressive for a trained pet, let alone a creature that had once ruled an entire death world. It balanced on one leg, caught objects thrown to it, and even allowed Quindar to ride on its back as it walked in circles around the stage. Throughout it all, the creature's eyes remained empty and lifeless. Whatever had made it the supreme hunter of Kalos 7 was gone, replaced by mindless obedience. "The applications are limitless," Vexthul explained to the fascinated crowd. "Imagine armies of tamed deathworld predators serving as soldiers. Picture these creatures as the ultimate guards for our most important facilities. Think of the scientific knowledge we could gain by studying them up close without fear of attack." The audience was clearly impressed. Representatives began whispering among themselves about potential trade agreements and technology exchanges. The synthetic collective requested detailed information about the conditioning process. The Altarians wanted to know if the technique could be applied to other dangerous species. As the demonstration wound down, Vexthul raised his arms again for attention. "This achievement represents a new era for our galaxy. No longer must we fear the death worlds and their monstrous inhabitants. No longer must we avoid entire sectors of space because of the creatures that dwell there. The Zelkari Empire has proven that even the most dangerous beasts can be brought to heel by superior intelligence and technology." The crowd erupted in applause. Beings of dozens of different species showed their approval in their own ways, clapping, chirping, flashing lights, or producing harmonic tones. The Ravenclaw stood motionless through it all, as lifeless as a statue. Unknown to anyone in the exhibition hall, a small human transport ship was approaching Nexus Prime Station at that very moment. Its pilot had radioed ahead to request docking permission for a routine diplomatic visit. The request had been approved without a second thought. After all, what possible impact could one human have on such a momentous occasion? The docking clamps engaged with a soft thud that Jake Morrison felt through the floor of his transport ship. He checked his uniform one last time in the small mirror beside the airlock, making sure everything was properly arranged for what he hoped would be a routine diplomatic meeting. "Ready, sir?" asked Corporal Lisa Martinez from behind him. She was checking her own appearance and organizing the data tablets they would need for their presentation to the Galactic Council representatives. As ready as anyone can be for their first official contact with alien civilizations, Jake replied with a nervous smile. He was 32 years old, a wildlife specialist with Earth's Conservation Corps, and he had been chosen for this mission because of his expertise in animal behavior and ecosystem management. The galaxy apparently had many questions about how Earth managed to maintain such a diverse and thriving biosphere. The airlock door hissed open, revealing a long corridor that curved gently upward. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth normal, and the air had a metallic taste that made Jake's nose wrinkle. But what struck him most was the sheer size of everything. The corridor was wide enough for a truck to drive through, and the ceiling was at least 15 feet high. "Welcome to Nexus Prime Station," said a tall, crystalline being that appeared to be waiting for them. Its body was translucent blue, with veins of silver light running through it like living circuits. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from somewhere inside its chest rather than from any visible mouth. "I am Station Commander Thelmos. We are honored to host representatives from Earth." Jake and Lisa stepped into the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. "Thank you for having us, Commander," Jake said, extending his hand in the universal human greeting he had been taught was considered polite by most galactic species. Thelmos touched Jake's hand briefly with one of his crystal appendages. The contact was surprisingly warm. "Your reputation precedes you, Lieutenant Morrison. The galactic community is very curious about your planet's wildlife management techniques. We understand that Earth maintains thousands of different species in a delicate balance. We do our best, Jake replied modestly. Though I have to admit, after seeing the size of the station, I'm starting to think our problems might be smaller than I imagined. As they walked through the corridors toward the main administrative section, Jake began to notice other beings moving through the station. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, while others moved on 4, 6, or even more limbs. A few seemed to float rather than walk at all. The variety was amazing, but what caught Jake's attention was something else entirely. Small creatures in transparent containers lined the walls at regular intervals. They appeared to be some kind of exotic pet collection or scientific specimens. Most were about the size of Earth cats or dogs, though their forms were completely alien. Some had scales, others had fur in colors that didn't exist in Earth's spectrum, and a few seemed to be made of living crystal, like the station commander. But as Jake passed each container, something strange began to happen. The creatures inside started acting nervous. A bird-like being with 4 wings stopped singing and pressed itself against the far wall of its cage. A reptilian creature that had been basking under a heat lamp suddenly darted into a hiding place. A small predator that looked like a cross between a wolf and a mantis began pacing frantically back and forth. Is something wrong with the animals? Lisa asked, noticing the same behavior. Commander Thelmos looked around with what might have been confusion on his alien features. That is unusual. They are normally quite calm. Perhaps the excitement from today's exhibition has affected them somehow. Exhibition? Jake asked. Oh yes, you arrived at a most fortunate time, the commander replied, his tone brightening. The Zelkari Empire is presenting something quite remarkable today. They have successfully captured and tamed a creature from one of the galaxy's most dangerous death worlds. Representatives from dozens of civilizations have come to witness this historic achievement. Jake felt a prickle of unease at the word tamed. In his experience, truly wild animals were never really tamed, only broken or conditioned. But he kept his thoughts to himself as they continued through the station. The strange behavior of the caged creatures continued wherever they went. By the time they had walked 3 corridors, Jake was certain it wasn't a coincidence. Every animal they passed reacted to his presence with fear, nervousness, or aggressive posturing. It was as if they sensed something about him that even he didn't understand. Sir, Lisa whispered as they paused at an intersection to wait for their guide to check directions. I've been watching the animals. They all calmed down again after we passed by. It's like they're reacting specifically to us. Or maybe just you. Jake had noticed the same thing. Behind them, the creatures they had already passed were returning to their normal behavior, while ahead, animals that couldn't even see them yet were already showing signs of agitation. I'm sure it's nothing, he said, but he didn't feel as confident as he sounded. They reached a massive set of double doors that towered above them. The sound of hundreds of voices in excited conversation could be heard from the other side. Commander Thelmos turned to face them. The exhibition is just concluding, he explained. Would you like to observe? It might give you interesting insights into galactic wildlife management techniques. Jake nodded, curious despite his growing unease. We'd be honored to attend. As they approached the doors, Jake became aware of a new sensation. It felt like being watched by something with very intent eyes. The feeling was familiar from his time working with dangerous animals on Earth, the prickle of awareness that came from being in the presence of a predator that was evaluating you as either threat or prey. But this felt different somehow. Stronger. More intelligent. The doors opened to reveal an enormous exhibition hall filled with hundreds of alien beings. On a stage at the center, Jake could see 2 blue-skinned figures standing next to what appeared to be an empty space. But as his eyes adjusted to the lighting, he realized the space wasn't empty at all. There was something there. Something large and dark that seemed to absorb the light around it. Something that had just turned its head in their direction. Jake felt his breath catch in his throat as 2 burning eyes fixed on him from across the crowded hall. He had worked with predators his entire career, from wolves to lions to the great white sharks in Earth's oceans. But he had never felt anything like the intelligence that looked back at him from that stage. And somehow, he was absolutely certain that the creature was looking specifically at him. Lieutenant Morrison? Commander Thelmos's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you quite well? Jake realized he had stopped walking and was standing frozen in the doorway. I'm fine, he managed to say, though his voice sounded strange to his own ears. Let's find some seats. But as they made their way into the hall, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The creature on the stage hadn't looked away from him for even a second. And unless he was very much mistaken, it had just made a sound, low and rumbling, and definitely not part of whatever demonstration the aliens had been conducting. It sounded almost like a greeting. Jake and Lisa found seats in the back section of the exhibition hall, trying not to disturb the ongoing demonstration. The audience was completely focused on the stage, where the blue-skinned Zelkari Beastmaster was putting the massive creature through what appeared to be a series of obedience exercises. Jake tried to pay attention to the presentation, but his eyes kept being drawn to the creature itself. Even from this distance, he could see it was magnificent. Its black scales gleamed under the stage lights, and its movements had a fluid grace that spoke of perfect evolutionary design. This was clearly a predator that had been shaped by millions of years of survival on a world where only the strongest and smartest lived to reproduce. But something was terribly wrong. The creature moved like a machine following programmed instructions rather than a living being making choices. Its eyes, which Jake could see were naturally bright and alert, seemed dulled and unfocused. This wasn't training. This was the result of having its spirit completely broken. The neural conditioning process, Ambassador Vexthal was explaining to the audience, required 6 months of careful psychological restructuring. We had to identify and eliminate every aggressive instinct, every territorial behavior, every predatory response that made this creature dangerous. Jake felt sick. He had spent his entire career working with dangerous animals, and he knew the difference between training and abuse. What he was seeing on that stage was the result of systematic psychological torture designed to destroy everything that made the creature what it was. The Beast Master, Quindar, gave another command. Present yourself for inspection. The massive creature immediately moved into a position that exposed its throat and belly, the most vulnerable parts of any predator's anatomy. It held the pose perfectly still while Quindar walked around it, occasionally touching various parts of its body to demonstrate his complete control. That's when it happened. As Quindar moved to the creature's head to check its eyes and teeth, the Ravenclaw's gaze wandered across the audience. Its empty stare passed over hundreds of alien faces without showing any sign of recognition or interest. Then its eyes found Jake. The change was instantaneous and shocking. The dull, lifeless look vanished from the creature's eyes, replaced by a sharp intelligence that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. The Ravenclaw's entire posture shifted, its head turning fully toward Jake's section of the audience despite Quindar's continued commands. For a long moment, predator and human stared at each other across the crowded hall. Jake felt like he was looking into the eyes of something that truly saw him, not as food or threat, but as something else entirely. Something the creature recognized on a level that went beyond conscious thought. A low rumble began deep in the Ravenclaw's chest. It was barely audible at first, but it grew steadily louder until even the audience members in the front rows could hear it. The sound wasn't aggressive. It was more like the greeting call of a wild animal encountering something familiar after a long separation. Quindar noticed immediately that something was wrong. He began barking commands in the Zelkari language while pressing buttons on his control device. But for the first time since the demonstration began, the creature ignored him completely. Its attention remained fixed on Jake. "What's happening?" Lisa whispered. She had noticed that several audience members were turning to look in their direction, trying to figure out what had captured the creature's attention. Jake didn't answer. He couldn't. Something was happening that he didn't understand, but felt in his bones. Moving slowly and deliberately, he stood up. The moment Jake rose to his full height, the Ravenclaw's behavior became even more pronounced. The rumbling sound changed pitch, becoming a series of complex vocalizations that sounded almost like speech. The creature began straining against the neural collar around its neck, not in pain or anger, but as if it was trying to communicate something urgent. Ambassador Vexthal had noticed the disturbance and was speaking quickly to his aides while pointing toward the back of the hall. Quindar increased the intensity of his control device, sending visible jolts of energy through the creature's collar. But the pain that would normally have brought instant compliance seemed to have no effect at all. Jake took a step forward, then another. He had no clear idea why he was doing it, but something inside him, some instinct he had developed through years of working with dangerous animals, was telling him that this was important. More than important. This was a moment that would change everything. With each step Jake took toward the stage, the Ravenclaw's calls became more intense. But they weren't calls of aggression or warning. Jake had heard enough predator vocalizations to recognize the difference. These sounded like calls of recognition, perhaps even joy. The audience was beginning to panic. Beings that had never heard an untamed Ravenclaw's voice were experiencing a primal fear that their own evolutionary history had programmed into them. Several representatives from prey species had already started moving toward the exits. But Jake kept walking forward. The creature's eyes never left his face, and he found himself unable to look away from its gaze. There was an intelligence there that was older and deeper than anything he had ever encountered. This wasn't just a smart animal. This was a being that understood things about the universe that most civilized species had forgotten. Quindar was shouting now, frantically adjusting controls on his device while barking orders that the Ravenclaw completely ignored. Ambassador Vexthal had started making excuses to the audience, claiming that there was a technical malfunction with their control systems that would be resolved momentarily. But Jake knew better. This wasn't a malfunction. This was recognition. The energy restraints around the creature's limbs began to flicker and spark. The Ravenclaw wasn't fighting against them with brute force. It was moving in ways that put stress on the energy fields at precisely the right points. Whatever intelligence had made it the apex predator of its death world was reasserting itself, and it was far more clever than its captors had realized. Station security began moving into position around the hall, their weapons drawn, but not yet aimed. Commander Thelmos was speaking rapidly into a communication device, probably calling for backup. Jake reached the edge of the stage area just as the energy restraints failed completely. Sparks flew in all directions, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. The Ravenclaw was free. But instead of attacking its tormentors or trying to escape, the massive creature did something that shocked everyone in the hall. It looked directly at Jake and slowly, deliberately, lowered its head in what could only be described as a bow of respect. The exhibition hall fell completely silent except for the sound of Jake's heartbeat thundering in his ears. In that moment of perfect stillness, he understood something that would change not just his life, but the galaxy's understanding of humanity's place in the universe. He wasn't looking at a tamed beast or a broken predator. He was looking at an apex predator that had just recognized something in him that it had never encountered before, something that even the strongest creature in its part of the galaxy instinctively acknowledged as superior. Jake slowly reached out his hand. The Ravenclaw moved its massive head forward until Jake's palm rested against the scales between its eyes. The contact sent a jolt of recognition through both of them. Then the alarm started blaring. The moment Jake's hand touched the Ravenclaw's scales, everything changed. The creature's eyes, which had been gradually coming back to life throughout the encounter, suddenly blazed with an intelligence and awareness that made several audience members cry out in terror. This was no longer the broken, obedient beast that had been performing tricks moments before. This was an apex predator in full possession of its faculties. Quindar screamed commands in the Zelkari language while frantically adjusting his control device to maximum power. Bolts of energy crackled through the neural collar around the Ravenclaw's neck, causing its massive frame to shudder with pain. But the creature didn't break eye contact with Jake. If anything, the torture seemed to strengthen its resolve. Impossible, Ambassador Vexthal shouted from the stage. The neural conditioning is absolute. No creature can resist the collar at full power. But the Ravenclaw was doing exactly that. It pressed forward against the pain, moving closer to Jake until they were separated by less than 3 feet. The creature's breathing was labored from the electrical torture, but its gaze remained steady and determined. Jake felt something he had never experienced before, a connection with a completely alien intelligence that somehow understood him on a level deeper than words or even conscious thought. The creature wasn't just looking at him, it was recognizing something fundamental about what he was. Security forces poured into the exhibition hall from multiple entrances. The troops were a mix of species, all carrying energy weapons designed to stop dangerous creatures without killing them. But they hesitated at the edge of the stage area, clearly uncertain about how to handle a situation where a human was standing within striking distance of a freed deathworld predator. "Sir, please step away from the creature," called the security chief, a heavily armored being that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros. "It's extremely dangerous and unpredictable." Jake didn't move. Something inside him knew that stepping away would be the wrong choice, not just for him, but for the creature as well. "It's not going to hurt me," he said calmly. "You don't understand," Quindar shouted from his position near the control console. "This beast killed 17 of our capture team members. It destroyed 3 heavy transports before we finally subdued it. It's a killing machine." The Ravenclaw made a sound that Jake was beginning to understand was its equivalent of speech. The vocalizations were complex and nuanced, clearly carrying meaning even though he couldn't translate the specific words. But the tone was unmistakable. The creature was trying to tell him something important. Lisa had managed to push through the panicking crowd to reach the stage area. "Jake, please," she called out. "Whatever's happening here, we need to be careful. This could cause a diplomatic incident." But Jake was beyond caring about diplomacy. He was staring into the eyes of a being that had been tortured and broken for months, and he could see the desperate intelligence trapped inside the neural conditioning. The creature wasn't just recognizing him, it was asking for his help. "How long has it been since you captured it?" Jake asked Quindar, not taking his eyes off the Ravenclaw. 8 months, the Beastmaster replied, his voice shaking with rage and confusion. 8 months of careful conditioning to break every aggressive instinct. "You didn't break its instincts," Jake said quietly. "You just taught it to hide them. And now it remembers what it really is." The energy collar was starting to smoke from the overload. Sparks flew from the control device in Quindar's hands as he pushed it beyond its designed limits. The Ravenclaw writhed in obvious agony, but it still refused to back down or look away from Jake. Ambassador Vexthal was shouting orders at the security forces, demanding they take action to protect the audience. But the troops remained frozen in place, uncertain whether shooting at the creature might hit the human who was standing so close to it. That's when Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He stepped forward and placed both hands on the sides of the Ravenclaw's massive head, looking directly into its pain-filled eyes. "I see you," he said softly. "I see what they did to you, and I see what you really are." The creature's response was immediate and dramatic. It pressed its head against Jake's hands while making a sound that could only be described as a purr, if purrs could come from something the size of a small building. The trust implied in that gesture made several audience members gasp. But more importantly, the creature. Completely. The energy field that had been causing it such pain seemed to lose all effect. The Ravenclaw stood tall and proud for the first time since its capture, every line of its body radiating the confidence of a supreme predator. Quindar's control device finally overloaded completely, sending up a shower of sparks before dying with the electronic whine. The neural collar around the creature's neck flickered once, and then went dark. For a moment, the exhibition hall was completely silent except for the sound of the fire suppression system activating to deal with the smoking electronics. The Ravenclaw stood free for the first time in 8 months, and every being in the hall waited to see what it would do. The creature looked around the hall slowly, taking in the hundreds of alien faces staring back at it in terror. Then it turned back to Jake and made a series of complex vocalizations that sounded almost like conversation. Jake found himself nodding, even though he didn't understand the specific meaning of the sounds. "It's telling you something," Lisa said wonderingly. "It's actually talking to you." Jake nodded. "I think it's saying goodbye." The Ravenclaw touched its massive head to Jake's hands one more time, a gesture that was unmistakably affectionate. Then it stepped back and released a call that echoed through the exhibition hall like thunder. But this wasn't a roar of rage or a hunting cry. This was a war cry, the sound of a supreme predator announcing its return to the galaxy. The creature turned away from Jake and looked toward the massive viewing windows that formed one wall of the exhibition hall. The transparent aluminum was designed to withstand the pressure of deep space, but it hadn't been designed to stop a 12-foot-tall Deathworld predator that had just remembered what it was capable of. The Ravenclaw gathered itself and leaped. Its powerful legs launched it across the stage like a living missile. It struck the viewing window with tremendous force, sending spider web cracks spreading across the transparent surface. Alarms began blaring throughout the station as emergency systems detected the breach. The Ravenclaw struck the window again, and this time the entire panel gave way. Air rushed out into space, creating a howling wind that sent papers and debris flying around the hall. Emergency bulkheads began sealing the breach, but the Ravenclaw was already gone, disappearing into the maze of corridors and maintenance shafts that honeycombed the station's outer hull. Jake stood alone on the stage, staring at the broken window where the creature had made its escape. He could still feel the warmth of its scales under his hands and the weight of its intelligent gaze. Something fundamental had changed in that moment of contact, not just for him, but for the galaxy's understanding of what humanity represented. Behind him, Ambassador Vexthul was screaming orders at security forces while Quindar stared at his destroyed control device in shock. But Jake barely heard them. He was thinking about the intelligence he had seen in the Ravenclaw's eyes and the way it had looked at him with something that could only be called respect. On Earth, humans were the apex predators of their world. But apparently, that status extended far beyond their home planet. The galaxy was about to learn something about humanity that would change everything. And Jake had the feeling that the Ravenclaw's escape was just the beginning. The emergency bulkhead slammed shut with a series of thunderous clangs, sealing off the breach in the exhibition hall. Emergency lighting cast everything in a harsh red glow, while the station's life support systems worked to restore normal atmosphere. But the damage was already done. The Ravenclaw was loose somewhere in the vast network of corridors and maintenance areas that made up Nexus Prime Station. Jake stood in the middle of the chaos, still trying to process what had just happened. Around him, hundreds of alien beings were either fleeing toward the exits or standing frozen in shock. Security forces were establishing a perimeter around the stage while medics attended to several delegates who had fainted during the creature's escape. Lieutenant Morrison, Commander Thelmos, materialized beside Jake, his crystal body flickering with agitated light patterns. "Are you injured? Do you require medical attention?" "I'm fine," Jake replied automatically, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. He felt different somehow, as if the contact with the Ravenclaw had changed something fundamental about how he saw the world. Ambassador Vexthul stormed across the stage, his forearms gesturing wildly as he shouted at anyone who would listen. "This is a disaster. Do you understand what you've done? That creature represents years of research and development. Millions of credits and investment. You mean you've lost your slave," Jake said quietly, but his words carried clearly in the sudden silence that fell over the stage area. The Zelkari ambassador spun to face him, his red eyes blazing with fury. "Slave? That creature is a dangerous predator from a death world. We provided a service to the galaxy by neutralizing its threat and making it useful. You tortured it into submission," Jake replied, his voice growing stronger. "I've worked with dangerous animals my entire career, and I know the difference between training and abuse. What you did to that creature was systematic psychological destruction." Before Vexthul could respond, a new series of alarms began blaring throughout the station. A mechanical voice announced in multiple languages, "Security Alert Level 3. All personnel remain in designated safe areas. Dangerous creature at large. Security teams respond to outer hull breach in Section 7. The lights flickered as something heavy moved through the ventilation system above their heads. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling tiles as the Ravenclaw made its way through the station's infrastructure. Jake couldn't help but smile. The creature was far more intelligent than its captors had realized. It's heading for the docking bays, Commander Thelmos observed, studying readings on a portable scanner. But that section of the station is sealed off. It's trapped. Jake shook his head. No, it's not trapped. It's hunting. Hunting what? Lisa asked nervously. A way out. Security Chief Borak, the bear-rhinoceros hybrid who had tried to talk Jake away from the creature earlier, approached the group with his weapon drawn but not aimed. We need to evacuate this section immediately. That thing could come back through the ventilation system at any moment. It won't come back here, Jake said with certainty. It got what it came for. Which was what? Vexthul demanded. Jake looked at the Zelkari ambassador for a long moment before answering. Recognition. Acknowledgement of what it really is. You spent 8 months trying to convince it that it was nothing more than a trained animal. In 30 seconds, it remembered that it's the apex predator of an entire world. Another series of impacts echoed through the station's hull, followed by the distinctive sound of metal being torn apart. The Ravenclaw had found something in the outer sections and was systematically dismantling it. Engineering reports that the creature has breached Cargo Bay 7, Thelmos announced, reading from his scanner. It's, oh my. What? Several voices asked at once. It's accessed the docking bay, where the smaller transport ships are stored. And it appears to be examining the control systems of a cargo shuttle. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. It's not just intelligent. It's learning. The implications of that statement hit everyone at the same time. A creature capable of understanding alien technology well enough to operate it was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. But what worried Jake wasn't the threat the Ravenclaw might pose to the station. It was what might happen when the Zelkari military arrived to recapture it. You have to let it go, Jake said suddenly. The words surprised even him, but as soon as he spoke them, he knew they were right. The Ravenclaw wasn't just trying to escape, it was trying to return home. After 8 months of captivity and torture, all it wanted was to get back to its own world. Absolutely not, Vexthul snapped. That creature represents the culmination of our greatest scientific achievement. We will not simply allow it to escape because one human feels sorry for it. It's not about feeling sorry for it, Jake replied. It's about understanding what you're really dealing with. That creature didn't break free because of an equipment malfunction. It broke free because it chose to. The neural conditioning didn't fail. It was overcome by sheer force of will. Before anyone could respond, the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, but in the darkness, everyone heard the same thing, a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to come from the very structure of the station itself. What is that? Lisa whispered. Jake listened carefully to the sound. It was familiar somehow, like something he had heard before, but couldn't quite place. Then recognition hit him like a physical blow. It's an engine startup sequence, he said. The Ravenclaw figured out how to activate a shuttle. Commander Thelmos was frantically working his scanner, trying to get readings from the outer sections of the station. Impossible. Those systems require biometric authorization and knowledge of complex operational procedures. The vibration grew stronger, accompanied by the distinctive whine of fusion engines building toward takeoff thrust. Whatever the Ravenclaw was doing, it was working. Security teams report that the creature has sealed itself inside cargo shuttle designator Alpha 7, Thelmos announced. The bay doors are opening. It's actually preparing for launch. Jake closed his eyes and tried to imagine what the Ravenclaw must be feeling. 8 months of captivity, torture, and forced submission, followed by a brief moment of recognition and freedom. Now it had a chance to escape, not just from the station but from this entire sector of space. Let it go, he said again, more firmly this time. I will not, Vexthul began. Let it go, Jake interrupted, or I'll make sure every species in the galaxy knows exactly how the Zelkari Empire treats captured sentient beings. The word sentient hung in the air like a physical presence. Jake had just made an accusation that would have profound legal and ethical implications throughout galactic civilization. If the Ravenclaw was truly sentient rather than simply intelligent, then its capture and conditioning constituted slavery and torture under galactic law. The engine noise reached a crescendo, and suddenly the station shuddered as something large and powerful launched itself from the docking bay. Through the sealed exhibition hall, Jake could see a brief flash of light as the stolen shuttle engaged its faster-than-light drive and disappeared into the depths of space. The Ravenclaw was free. In the sudden silence that followed, Jake became aware that every being in the hall was staring at him. Some with curiosity, others with fear, and a few with what might have been respect. He had just witnessed, and perhaps facilitated, the escape of the galaxy's most dangerous captured predator. But more than that, he had learned something about humanity that no one else seemed to understand yet. The Ravenclaw hadn't just recognized him as another intelligent being. It had recognized him as something more fundamental, something that even an apex predator instinctively acknowledged as superior. The question was, what did that mean for humanity's place in the galaxy? And more importantly, what would happen when other species figured it out?
Jake thought about the question carefully. They respected me, treated me as a potential threat rather than prey. But that's normal for anyone who works with dangerous animals. You learn to project confidence and authority. Is it normal for apex predators to submit to that authority? The question hung in the air between them. Jake thought about his years working with Earth's most dangerous creatures, and he began to realize that his relationship with them might not have been as normal as he had always assumed. "Dr. Carter," he said slowly, "what exactly are you implying?" Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station once again. Both Jake and the Altrian scientists moved to the viewport, where they could see a massive ship approaching Nexus Prime. The vessel was distinctly Zelkari in design, angular, aggressive, and bristling with weapons. "The Empire's response force," Dr. Carter observed. "They're not going to be satisfied with simply containing the damage. They'll want their property back." "It's not their property," Jake said firmly. "That creature is a sentient being. Can you prove that?" The question stopped Jake cold. In the heat of the moment, he had made the accusation based on his instinctive understanding of the Ravenclaw's intelligence and self-awareness. But proving sentience in a galactic court will require evidence that he simply didn't have. "You saw how it looked at me," he said finally. "You saw the intelligence in its eyes. That wasn't just animal cunning. That was true awareness." Dr. Carter's eyes shifted to a golden color that Jake couldn't interpret. "I saw something, yes, but what I saw raises more questions about you than about the creature." "What do you mean?" "I mean that in 4 decades of xenobiological research, I have documented the behavioral patterns of over 3,000 different predator species from across the galaxy, and I have never, not once, seen an apex predator show submission to any individual being." She paused. "Until today." The implications of her words were staggering. Jake stared out at the approaching Zelkari dreadnought while trying to process what Dr. Carter was suggesting. If she was right, then his encounter with the Ravenclaw wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented in galactic history. "There's something else," Dr. Carter continued. "I've been reviewing the historical records of human contact with alien fauna. The pattern is subtle, but it's consistent. Whenever humans have encountered dangerous predators from other worlds, the creatures have shown unusual behavioral modifications." "What kind of modifications?" "Reduced aggression toward humans specifically, increased compliance with human direction, and in several documented cases, protective behavior toward humans when threatened by other predators." Dr. Carter's eyes shifted to a bright silver color. The galactic zoological community has always attributed the phenomena to coincidence or... Jake felt like the floor was shifting beneath his feet. "Are you saying that humans have some kind of natural authority over alien predators?" "I'm saying that the evidence suggests your species may have evolved characteristics that other galactic civilizations lack. Characteristics that even the most dangerous predators recognize and respond to." The conversation was interrupted by a communication alert from the suite's intercom system. Commander Thelmosa's voice filled the room. "Lieutenant Morrison, your presence is requested in the main conference chamber. The Zelkari military delegation wishes to speak with you regarding the incident." Jake and Dr. Carter exchanged glances. Doctor, Jake said quietly, if what you're suggesting is true, then this conversation isn't over. No, she agreed, her eyes shifting to a deep red color that Jake instinctively recognized as concern. I have a feeling it's just beginning. As Jake prepared to face the Zelkari military delegation, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, not just for him, but for humanity's entire relationship with the galaxy. The question was whether that change would be for better or worse. The main conference chamber of Nexus Prime Station had been designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of different species. The ceiling soared 40 feet overhead, with atmospheric controls that could provide suitable breathing conditions for any known form of galactic life. But despite its impressive size, the room felt cramped and tense as Jake entered. 3 Zelkari military officers sat at one end of the massive oval table. Their blue skin darker than the civilians Jake had met earlier, and their bearing unmistakably hostile. Commander Thelmo sat to one side, his crystal body flickering with nervous light patterns. Dr. Carter had been allowed to attend as an independent scientific observer, her silver skin gleaming under the chamber's bright lights. At the head of the table sat a being Jake hadn't seen before, a tall, imposing figure in elaborate robes that seemed to shift color as he moved. The being's face was hidden beneath a translucent hood, but Jake could feel the weight of its attention like a physical presence. Lieutenant Morrison, the robed figure said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am Arbiter Zent of the Galactic Mediation Council. I have been sent to investigate the incident involving the escaped Ravenclaw and to determine what consequences, if any, should follow. Jake took his seat across from the Zelkari officers, tried to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. Arbiter Zent, I'm honored to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Indeed. The Arbiter's hood turned slightly toward the Zelkari delegation. General Kexmore, please present your formal complaint. The center Zelkari officer, a heavily scarred individual with mechanical implants replacing one of his eyes, leaned forward aggressively. The facts are simple, Arbiter. The human's presence caused a catastrophic failure in our creature containment systems, resulting in the loss of invaluable scientific research and a dangerous predator being released into galactic space. How exactly do you believe Lieutenant Morrison caused this failure? The Arbiter asked. The timing cannot be coincidence, General Kexmore replied. For 8 months, our conditioning held perfectly. The creature was completely docile and obedient. Then this human appears, and within minutes our entire control system collapses. Dr. Carter cleared her throat politely. If I may, Arbiter, I would like to present an alternative interpretation of the events. The Arbiters had turned toward her. Please proceed, Dr. Carter. The Altrian scientist activated a holographic display above the table, showing detailed recordings of the incident from multiple angles. What we witnessed was not a system failure, but a psychological breakthrough. The Ravenclaw's conditioning didn't collapse. It was overcome by the creature's recognition of authority beyond its own species without extensive conditioning. That would normally be true, Dr. Carter agreed, but humans appear to be an exception to that rule. She manipulated the holographic display, showing various recorded incidents from throughout human space exploration. Over the past 50 years, there have been hundreds of documented cases of alien predators showing unusual deference to human authority. The galactic zoological community has dismissed these as anomalies, but the pattern is too consistent to ignore. Jake watched the recordings with growing amazement. Ship after ship showed similar scenes. Humans working with dangerous alien creatures that should have been completely hostile, predators from Deathworlds following human commands without any apparent conditioning or coercion. This is circumstantial evidence at best, one of the other Zelkari officers protested. It proves nothing about causation. Perhaps not, the Arbiter said thoughtfully, but it does raise interesting questions about human evolutionary history. The hooded figure turned back toward Jake. Lieutenant Morrison, Dr. Carter's research suggests that your species may have developed unique characteristics during its evolution. What can you tell us about Earth's environmental conditions? Jake considered the question carefully. Earth is challenging. We have extreme weather patterns, natural disasters, and a wide variety of dangerous predators. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, We're not the strongest or fastest species on our world, but we're extremely persistent and adaptable. And how did humanity achieve dominance over Earth's other predators? Through intelligence, tool use, and social cooperation, but also through... Jake paused, trying to find the right words. Through force of will, I suppose. Humans have always refused to accept that any creature was naturally superior to us. Dr. Carter's eyes shifted to a bright gold color. That may be the key factor, arbiter. Most galactic species evolved on worlds where they were either dominant from the beginning or where they found ecological niches that avoided direct competition with apex predators. Humans are unique in that they evolved in direct competition with multiple apex predator species, and won. The implications of that statement hit Jake like a physical blow. You're saying that humans are the only species in the galaxy that successfully challenged and defeated their own world's apex predators? Not just defeated them, Dr. Carter corrected, domesticated them, turned them into allies and partners. No other known species has ever achieved that level of dominance over their planetary ecosystem. General Kexmore's mechanical, I word as it focused on Jake with obvious hostility. Even if this theory were correct, it would only prove that humans are more dangerous than we initially realized. That creature was worth millions of credits and represented years of research. Compensation must be paid. I don't think you understand the situation, General, Jake said quietly. That creature wasn't your property. It was a sentient being that you tortured and enslaved. Sentient. The General's voice rose to nearly a shout. It's an animal, a predator from a death world. It's a being capable of learning alien technology, understanding complex social situations, and making sophisticated decisions about its own future. Jake replied firmly. When it chose to approach me instead of attacking its captors, it demonstrated higher reasoning. When it figured out how to operate that shuttle, it proved its intelligence. And when it chose freedom over revenge, it showed moral judgment. The Arbiter leaned forward slightly. These are serious accusations, Lieutenant Morrison. Are you formally claiming that the Ravenclaw meets the galactic standards for sentient being status? Jake felt the weight of the moment. What he said next would have implications far beyond this single incident. If he was wrong, he could be facing criminal charges for interfering with legitimate scientific research. But if he was right, yes, Arbiter, I am making that formal claim. The chamber fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat and the subtle hum of the station's life support systems. Dr. Carter's eyes had shifted to a deep blue color that he was beginning to recognize as excitement or anticipation. Finally, the Arbiter spoke. This claim will require extensive investigation and evaluation by qualified xenopsychologists. Such a process could take months or even years to complete, which conveniently gives the creature time to disappear completely into uncharted space. General Kexmore said bitterly. Perhaps, the Arbiter acknowledged. But if Lieutenant Morrison's claim proves correct, then the Zelkari Empire may find itself facing charges of slavery and torture under galactic law. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had come to the station for a simple diplomatic meeting about wildlife management. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after Jake's formal declaration that the Ravenclaw was a sentient being. Representatives from over 200 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. Their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity that few humans had ever witnessed. Jake sat in the designated witness area, feeling very small and very alone as the fate of human galactic relations was debated above his head. Arbiter Zent had taken his place at the central podium, his robe form seeming to command attention from every being present. We are here to address a situation that has implications far beyond a single escaped creature, he announced. We must determine whether humanity's apparent influence over apex predators represents a diplomatic opportunity or a security threat. General Kexmore rose from the Zelkari delegation. The threat is obvious, Arbiter. These humans can override our most sophisticated control systems simply by being present. How can we maintain security for captured Deathworld specimens if any human can undo months of conditioning with a glance? The General raises valid concerns, agreed the representative from the Korathi hive mind, a collective consciousness that spoke through multiple bodies simultaneously. Our own facilities house dozens of dangerous creatures. If humans can destabilize our containment protocols, then every research station in the galaxy is potentially compromised. But Dr. Carter, speaking for the scientific community, offered a different perspective. Perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of seeing human influence as a threat to our control systems, we should recognize it as evidence that our understanding of apex predator psychology has been fundamentally flawed. Jake watched the debate with growing unease. The longer it continued, the more clear it became that several species viewed humanity as a potential threat that needed to be contained or controlled. The representative from the Mechanical Collective had already proposed restrictions on human access to Deathworld research facilities. The Zelkari were pushing for reparations and formal limits on human interference with their property. Then something unexpected happened. A new voice joined the discussion, transmitted from deep space, carrying the authentication codes of a long-range exploration vessel. Jake felt his blood run cold. Somewhere in the depths of space, there was apparently something large enough and aggressive enough to attack starships. And given the timing of this discovery, he had a terrible suspicion about what it might be. Captain Liu, Arbiter Zen continued, "Are you prepared to render assistance to the damaged vessel?" "That's complicated, Arbiter. The attacking creature appears to still be in the area. Our sensors are detecting a large organic signature moving around the damaged ship. We can't approach safely without risking our own vessel." The assembly hall fell silent as the implications sank in. A Deathworld predator was loose in space, actively hunting and attacking ships. This was exactly the kind of scenario that the Galaxy Security Forces had spent centuries trying to prevent. General Kexmore rose from his seat with obvious satisfaction. "This confirms our worst fears, Arbiter. The escaped Ravenclaw has already begun attacking innocent vessels. The humans' interference has created exactly the crisis we predicted." But Jake was studying the star charts displayed above the assembly, comparing Captain Liu's position with the known location of Kalo 7. Something didn't add up. "Arbiter," Jake said, standing up despite the breach of protocol. "Permission to speak?" The hooded figure turned toward him. "Granted, Lieutenant Morrison. The location Captain Liu reported is nowhere near the trajectory the Ravenclaw would have taken to return to its home world. If it would simply try to escape, it would have headed straight for Kalo 7. But this attack happened in the opposite direction." Dr. Carter's eyes shifted to a bright silver color as she accessed her data systems. "Lieutenant Morrison is correct, Arbiter. The attack site is over 40 light-years from any possible escape route to Kalo 7. Then what is your explanation for this creature's presence?" General Kexmore demanded from the damaged vessel. "Something is being transferred from the research ship to the organic signature we've been tracking. Can you get a visual confirmation?" Arbiter Zent asked. Ake closed his eyes, trying to imagine what the Ravenclaw must be experiencing. Months of captivity and torture, followed by escape and a desperate journey across space to find its captured family. And now it was carefully extracting survivors from a damaged ship while avoiding contact with potential threats. "Arbiter," Jake said quietly, "I request permission to speak directly with Captain Liu." "For what purpose?" "To offer the creature safe passage." The assembly erupted in protests and objections. The idea of negotiating with a Deathworld predator was so far outside normal galactic protocol that most species didn't even have words for it. But Jake pressed on. "The Ravenclaw isn't attacking random ships. It's conducting a rescue operation. If we approach it as a thinking being rather than a wild animal, we might be able to resolve this peacefully." General Kexmore stood up so quickly that his chair toppled backward. "Absolutely not. That creature is Zelkari property, and any beings it has extracted from our research vessel are also our property." "They're not property," Jake said firmly. "They're family." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Around the assembly hall, beings from dozens of different species considered what Jake was proposing, that they recognized the family bonds and social structures of creatures they had always classified as dangerous animals. Arbiter Zenth was quiet for a long moment, his hooded head turning from Jake to the Zelkari delegation and back again. Finally he spoke. "Captain Liu, this is Nexus Prime Control. Stand by for communication protocols from Lieutenant Morrison of Earth. As Jake prepared to attempt the first negotiation between humanity and a free Deathworld predator, he realized that everything was about to change, not just for the creatures involved, but for the galaxy's entire understanding of intelligence, family, and the rights of non-technological beings. The Ravenclaw had proven that love and loyalty could overcome even the most sophisticated control systems. Now it was up to Jake to prove that communication and respect could overcome fear and prejudice. The success or failure of the next few minutes would determine whether humanity became the galaxy's mediators with the dangerous corners of the universe, or whether both humans and Deathworld predators would be classified as threats too dangerous to allow freedom. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. This is Captain Lou aboard the Earth vessel Pioneer. The voice said, "We're currently in the Outer Veil sector, and we're requesting immediate assistance from any available ships."